Hello, and welcome to a brand new podcast, 3 Lessons from Breakthrough Leaders. I'm Zana Ryabchik, MD at Breakthrough Global.
And I'm Dr. Bart Sale, CEO and founder at Breakthrough Global, where we've spent the past 30 years developing the breakthrough methodology to help transform companies looking to reach their highest level.
And in this podcast, we'll meet the world's foremost leaders and creative talents, distilling their knowledge and experience into 3 lessons, which we guarantee will help you and your companies to unleash your potential. And Bart and I will take a moment to analyse the key takeaways and the opportunity for breakthrough thinking that arises from each one.
And in today's episode, we're excited to have as our first guest, Rita Clifton. Rita has worked with leading businesses and organisations around the world. She's been the Vice Chairman and Strategy Director at Saatchi Saatchi. She was UK CEO and then Global Chairman for Interbrand. In 2014, Rita was awarded the CBE for services to the creative industries. Rita's latest book, Love Your Imposter, was released in 2020.
Today, we'll hear these 3 lessons from Rita. How to love your imposter syndrome.
In my experience, struggling with it is a waste of energy. This can be a source of drive, stretch, and self-improvement. And actually, it's a really powerful thing sometimes when you just go, do you know, I accept I've got to drive. Now let's make really good use of it.
The importance of your personal brand.
If the characteristics of strongly branded businesses are clarity, coherence, and leadership, if you apply that to yourself, your personal brand, what that means is some powerful thinking about, number one, what are your strengths? What are your goals? What's your purpose?
How putting other people first is the only way to lead.
Being a nurturing leader, in my view, is one of the most powerful ways to inhabit leadership, that you want to help people be better and look after them in a way that does encourage them to be better and build stronger relationships, stronger human relationships with other people, as opposed to trying to sort of create some sort of CEO avatar that we imagine is going to be the sort of person that succeeds at the top.
So let's get started. Lesson 1, love your imposter.
I think it's a good opportunity to look into that kind of concept of imposter syndrome a bit more, because we are hearing about it a lot at the moment. So what is imposter syndrome to you? What does it mean to you?
Well, what I would say is anyone who's listening into this, who has ever experienced this thing called imposter syndrome, I mean, you're in very good company, not only in quantity, but also in the nature of people who experience it. So 70% of people around seem to experience imposter syndrome at some point in their working lives, some of them on a daily basis, just about. And that goes up to 90% in the creative industries. I mean, it's almost something that ceases to be a syndrome and just starts to be a normal part of being a human being, frankly. There must be something in our psyches as humans that actually, this is a propulsion to develop and to stretch and to move on and move forward and innovate, maybe as a species. And I think that the research into imposter syndrome is really interesting. It was first identified in the 1970s, and it was a female psychologist that was helping outwardly successful women with some of their challenges, because a lot of them felt that they didn't deserve to have the success that they had, and that they were going to be found out and so on. So it was first felt to be a female thing, in great part because their success was contraindicated by society norms at the time. But also, actually, what transpired is that women tend to be better at sharing some of these things than their male counterparts. Now, what then happened, of course, is wave after wave of research over time would demonstrate that actually imposter syndrome was something that actually was shared by both men and women. Women tend to experience it a bit more than men, but nevertheless, it's something that that both men and women do seem to share. And guys actually experience it in a slightly different way, because, of course, society does indicate and expect that they should get on and to succeed. And what's more, actually, guys can feel an even bigger pressure, and so therefore, if they don't succeed, then they can actually suffer some real, more extreme mental health challenges along the way. So I think what's interesting, if you talk about some celebrities, I said you're in good company. I mean, Tom Hanks, Michelle Obama, Emma Watson, award-winning actress, Olivia Colman, who was the queen in The Crown, as we know. She talked about every time she goes on set, she thinks she's going to get fired. But actually, that has propelled her to practice more, to stretch herself more, to work harder, and so therefore to succeed. So she's actually found it, ironically, quite a useful drive. Hillary Clinton, talks about how when she first went to Columbia, she looked around the room and went, "Oh, all these women are going to be much smarter than me." So it is something that is so very common. And in my view, it's what makes us human. Some of these feelings of insecurity and worry, are we going to be good enough? These are all things that make us human and actually able to empathize with other human beings. And actually this syndrome, and the reason why I called it Love Your Imposter rather than overcome it or struggle with it, is that actually in my experience, struggling with it is a waste of energy. This can be a source of drive, stretch, and self-improvement. And we've all got drives from our childhood, from school, college, first jobs, relationships. We've all got things that kind of drive us and have made us who we are. And actually, it's a really powerful thing sometimes when you just go, I accept I've got a drive. Now let's make really good use of it. Now, for a minority of people, these things can be quite debilitating. And there you need to get some professional help. But for the vast majority of people, actually, this is something you can really change your mindset on. And so nowadays I go over my shoulder, I know you to my imposter. I know why you're there, and thank you, because you're going to help me be better. I'm just going to add one thing on this Love Your Imposter, get to learn to love and appreciate it. I was talking to someone who happened to be a martial arts person. Now, I'm saying that actually, I remember in the early days of Breakthrough, we used to do Tai Chi with each other. And actually, this wasn't a Tai Chi example, but I was talking to someone who happened to be a judo practitioner, judo expert. And they said, when I was explaining this phenomenon to them, they said, it's a little bit like judo, which is that you don't win at judo by beating and fighting your opponent. You win at judo by using their weight, your opponent's weight, to help you win. And I thought, what a great analogy. You use the weight of your imposter to help you win and stretch and move on. And I think that's such a positive way of looking at it.
That's a great way of looking at it. And just from my point of view, I've had imposter syndrome. I remember when I was going into prospective clients, into the offices and so on to meet with them, I would have this underlying feeling of discomfort, which I finally tracked down to a belief, actually, that I didn't belong there. That was my form of imposter syndrome at that time. And, I probably would overcope by convincing people I did belong there until I really, as you said, just relaxed into it and started to shift my belief about this, until I eventually and authentically came to a new belief rather than that limiting belief that I don't belong here. And they'll find out that I don't belong here. That was the imposter side of it. And I developed this much more powerful belief that actually I belong everywhere. So just relax.
And Bart, that's you just reminded me of one of the ways in which both you and Breakthrough really helped me, because I do remember I was in my early days of being a chief executive and had exactly the same feelings, which is that, somehow I needed to act up into the role of chief executive, looking as though I was doing ass kicking and air punching and crossing my arms, looking over, shoulder in those poses, if you like, that CEOs often do, and being owned by an American conglomerate. And somehow I kind of needed to again, act this part. And it was when we were doing Breakthrough, and suddenly it just clicked with me that the most powerful version I could be of a leader was to be the leader that I was. So that realization of authenticity, and actually I should just do the very best version of myself in that leadership role, stop chasing some spectre or image that I felt it should be. And that was a real moment for me of leadership. And, that has been something that has stayed with me.
That was fantastic. And it really struck me, Bart, when I was thinking back about it, probably relating back to the way I asked Rita the question in the first place, that in fact, that's a bit of an assumption from my side that this tends to be a more female-centered issue. Of course, it affects men and women. And that was an insight for me to realize that actually men often are suffering from this more. It's just that they're not verbalizing it.
You're right. It's everyone. And the example I've come across a lot with men is people who are promoted by the company to C-level, even to CEO. They still act as if they are at the place they were before they were promoted. And this is an imposter syndrome. And sometimes they're unaware of that. Sometimes they are aware of it. But the point is that what they need to do, what they haven't done, even though the company has promoted them, they haven't promoted themselves and moved into that more senior role in their mindset and their behavior and the way they think about themselves, their identity, in fact.
Absolutely. When we're coaching at Breakthrough, we're coaching individuals to promote themselves. Okay, let's hear more from Rita.
Lesson 2, clarity, coherence, leadership.
I've obviously worked in brand strategy and so on for a lot of my working life. And when I talk about personal branding, what I'm not talking about is the Kardashianization of personal branding. That's like saying, brands are just the sum of the name and the logo and the packaging. Whereas, of course, it's always been the substance that lies beneath that's really, really made strong brands work for the long term. And similarly with human beings. I mean, the way that you present yourself from a kind of, visual point of view or a personal presentation point of view, that just needs to reflect and do justice to what you want to do in life. I mean, it's just that's about saying, for people to say, oh, it doesn't matter what you look like, why are we being so superficial? Well, one can absolutely take that attitude, and I really do understand it. But if you're advising, a company with a great new product, you wouldn't say what an amazing new product, and it would be okay to put it in a sort of shabby old box and put it at the back of the shelf. You would go, you need to do justice to what's inside. But actually, the substance thing is the thing that brand thinking can really help with. And what I mean by that is that if the characteristics of strongly branded businesses are clarity, coherence, and leadership, if you apply that to yourself, your leadership brand, your personal brand, what that means is some powerful thinking about, number one, clarity. Who are you? What do you stand for? What are your strengths? What are your goals? What's your purpose? And really understand yourself. And I think that, we could all benefit from time to time from having a really good look at ourselves and just go, right, again, what am I here for? What are my strengths? What are my short, medium, and long-term goals? And they can be personal or professional, but having that sense of clarity is fundamentally important in my view. The second thing is coherence. And if you were advising a company, you'd say, again, if your clarity, like with Apple, is about humanizing technology, you make that show up through everything you do, from the products that are designed for human beings rather than automatons, to Apple stores that actually give advice and make people, human beings feel that actually these are things for human beings to help them, as opposed to, again, a sort of tech shop that somehow looks a bit inhuman and impersonal. And of course, the people who help you are good at explaining things in a way that's human beings. So that's how you make the brand coherent. And when you think about that for yourself, you just go, actually, what do I want to be? Where do I want to get to? What are my goals? And make sure that the skills you're developing, the experiences that you are gaining, the knowledge that you are also gaining, these are the ways in which you can help your actions be coherent with your intentions. And I will say, if you want to end up running a business, part of the coherence is you want to end up running a business and on the board of organizations, you need to understand the language of finance. The language of the boardroom, whether we like it or not, is very often finance. And if you don't understand that language, you're either not going to get there, or otherwise you're not going to be as influential as you can be. So be coherent in that. Also being a good communicator, using your strengths, understanding yourself and being able to communicate that in an authentic way. I used to be a terrible, terrible communicator and presenter. I was so nervous and my voice would shake and it would be very high because I'd be very nervous. And I flap my arms a lot. My eye control, I'd be glancing around the room as though I wanted to seek approval, which I might have been, but it wasn't a good look. So you learn how to be a good presenter. And, as you'll know from Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, if you want to be really good at something, you've got to put in a lot of practice. 10,000 hours of practice, that's saying a lot of yeses to presenting and conferences and meetings and things of that kind. You've got to learn to be a good presenter. And then the third characteristic about leadership applied to your own brand. Obviously, you lead your own personal brand. You need to have a bit of conscious management of that to make sure that actually you are in it, you're developing yourself, you're stretching yourself, you're learning new skills, you're staying curious about what's happening. I don't care how old people are. The important thing is you want to keep on learning and opening your mind about what's happening in the world, about what's happening in the digital world, what's happening in the planet. That curiosity feeds you with energy that keeps you moving on and able to make the biggest difference that you can. So those three characteristics that you would apply from great brand strategy and learning applied to yourself, these are just good pieces of stimulus to make sure we are making the very most and the best of ourselves.
Excellent. So what are some of the key things you would advise the younger members of our audience who are just setting out on a career, on a life journey within business?
I would always say to them, again, coming back to the very first point of principle, know yourself, really try and understand yourself and what you're good at. There are so many evaluation tools that are very useful as stimulus to help you understand. So psychometric tests, Myers-Briggs, the Big Five. I mean, there are many, many development programs that actually can help you really understand what you're good at and what your skills are. And frankly, there's lots of online learning tools about communication, about finance. I mean, on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, there is so much that's available to help you. The important thing, though, is to be clear about what is it you're good at? What is it that you really, really want?
So I love that Rita loops that back onto how understanding brands and understanding what goes on behind brands will help us all to reach our own personal potential. And I completely agree with Rita that people should take an effort to learn more about themselves and their skills, their soft skills. We need to be asking ourselves, how can we add value to others when we aren't crystal clear about who we are first? So as humans, as we interact with others, it's easy to spot if someone is incongruent. And when we say that, we're looking at, what's misaligned about this person that shows up as incongruence, because it will damage our authenticity. What are they walking and talking that's different and not aligned?
Yeah, this is really important for leaders and leadership. Congruence is everything. And the thing about human beings is that we all have incredible bullshit detectors. And congruence comes from congruent triangles. They've got the same angles, they've got the same sides. And when a human being is congruent, then what they're thinking and what they're saying and what they're feeling are all in alignment. So on to lesson 3. Nice guys don't finish last.
I've always been very motivated by helping other people be brilliant. I mean, one of my earliest leadership lessons was teaching people dancing when I was a young teenager. And the motivation I got from helping people develop their skills to become better, to get on the stage, to get over their lack of confidence and exude their ability. And it just made me feel so good to see them being so good. And so that to me was my natural space as a leader, wanting to help other people be brilliant. And being a nurturing leader, in my view, is one of the most powerful angles on leadership. It's one of the most powerful ways to inhabit leadership, that you want to help people be better and look after them in a way that does encourage them to be better and build stronger relationships, stronger human relationships with other people, as opposed to trying to sort of create some sort of CEO avatar that we imagine is going to be the sort of typical person that succeeds at the top.
That really ties into the concept of human leadership and the need for a much more human leadership. Could you maybe elaborate a bit more for our listeners on what you believe really needs to come to the fore now within this human leadership approach, and what people should be doing to improve their human leadership attributes?
Well, I think it's always been very important to be a human leader. And when we look at some of the books about, good to great and the sort of leadership that has tended to help businesses to succeed in the long term, that sense of humanity has always been there. It's though become even more important in a digital age where everything is visible, so everything counts. And, you can try and pretend to be a smiley customer service organization on the outside, or be a sort of smiley, positive leader in your PR presentation. But if that's not the reality, if that's not what's happening in your day-to-day working relationships, it's going to get out. It's going to get out there with the scale and speed that takes your breath away. And people will be able to find it on Glassdoor, they'll be able to find it in social media. You can't get away with it anymore, however good your marketing and your public relations are. So we need to make sure that we are, becoming and being the human beings, the best human beings that we can be. And the other reason why it's so important is because successful businesses depend on developing sustainable relationships, trusting relationships between human beings, whether with your colleagues or with customers and so on. That's what generates long-term sustainable value and influence. And I remember, there was a textbook for MBA programs once, Marketing Warfare. I don't know if you remember this book. It had a tank on the first page. It talked about ambushing the consumer and guerrilla marketing and things like that. You just go, for goodness sake, if you want to develop long-term relationships, let's start using the language and the feelings of relationships, as opposed to, trying to kind of get short-term and sometimes very short-term impacts. Because if you're not doing it properly, if you're not looking after people in the long term, if you're just attacking them almost like a sort of, a war target, that's not how you develop long-term relationships. That might be how you get people in the funnel at the top, but frankly, they'll gush down the bottom when you're not living up to what you said you were going to. So that human leadership, you've got to be on the inside what you're doing on the outside. Stop pretending smiley on the outside and being an axe murdering culture on the inside, because it's not going to work. Now, if this applies to you as a human being, then actually you need to make sure you do some work on yourself. Know thyself. Be self-aware, for goodness sake. And that's why I'm always talking about clarity of who you are, what you're good at, what you stand for, what your goals are. Because if you're not clear about that, if you don't really try and understand yourself and what drives you and get that under control, then actually you're going to visit that on the people who are working with you and create a toxic cloud that is not going to enable people to flourish. Let's make sure that it's the best of yourself, your personal best, that we're really focusing on here as a human being, with pets and families and consciences and pulses and, goodness me, even a sense of humour. That's the kind of human leadership we need to connect with other human beings, flaws and all.
Just to build on that, it's ironic that in this last year or more, where a lot of people have been working remote, we've been working over Zoom as we are now, it's actually also allowed more humanity to come into the business system. Kids in the background wanting attention. And, at first people used to try and damp that down. But now I think people have realized that it's about you as a human being, and that business, despite how much of it is digitally produced and so on, business is relationships, and growing a business is growing relationships.
I totally agree. I think if there is one good thing emerging from the last year, is that actually we've seen each other. We've really seen each other. It's humanized business. The people I sit on boards with, I've seen them, and experienced them in their sort of their human selves. And I think that's been a really great thing. So, and I've connected with people all over the world in a way that it's difficult to do when you have to get on a plane and see people. We've connected with people in global conferences, and people have been able to attend speeches and conversations and things like that actually was difficult before we had Zoom world.
One more question about your book. And it's one of the kind of intriguing chapters. It's to do with the concept that nice guys don't finish last. So, you clearly have a big thing about the importance of niceness. Can you just explain a little bit about that and why it's so important to you?
Well, one of the chapters in the book, as you say, is called Nice Guys Don't Finish Last. And the reason I wrote that is I get infuriated by that philosophy. I mean, number one, it was said by an American baseball player and then manager. And secondly, he said it in 1946. And it's sort of well past its sell-by date, and it was used in a very specific context. But let me say now, and a little bit like the behavior in the digital world that will get out, if you are not nice to people, if you are a bullying, nasty leader who reduces other people, that's going to get out. And what's more, that's expensive. It's expensive because bullying has become a very expensive word in the business and organizational world. If you are a bullying leader, then actually not only will you be found out, also you might be kicked out, and also it might cost the company an awful lot of money. Secondly, though, more importantly, in some ways, is that you won't attract talent, and you'll leak or gush talent as well. People just won't want to work for a nasty and toxic leader or nasty and toxic organization. So that's a big risk. On the upside, as we know, purpose-driven organizations outperform all others. All the work by consultancies, EY or McKinsey or whatever, they prove and show the data where purpose-driven organizations outperform others who don't have a strong sense of purpose. A company like Unilever, is now, its purpose-driven brands are now outperforming all of their others. So, and you've even got someone, like BlackRock, one of the world's leading investment organizations, Larry Fink, saying, they are going to be investing in sustainable assets, sustainable businesses, as opposed to the unsustainable assets, and the ones who are looking for sort of short-term returns. So, when someone like that says that the tectonic plates are shifting. I think, though, that the other thing about niceness, and what I don't mean, of course, is nicey nice, as in, almost becoming a doormat and not being honest with people. I think being a nice leader is about giving people sometimes tough feedback because you want to help them improve. You want to help them to move on and make the most of themselves. And when I think about Jacinta Ardern, who, by the way, I've got the biggest girl crush on, and who, Jacinta Ardern for world leader, as far as I'm concerned, she talks about being, she doesn't accept that you can't be both strong and kind. And that strength and kindness is what epitomizes her leadership brand. And, she hugs people to reassure them. She's dealt with volcanoes and terrorist attacks and the pandemic, all while holding a baby. And also, by the way, while supporting one of her senior ministers in her government, who has talked openly about having imposter syndrome when he had to deal with a pandemic, but she supported him with her kindness. So kindness does make the world go round, and what goes around comes around. And, the world is a difficult enough place as it is. I think it's imperative on all of us to make our connections with other people as kind and as nice as they can be. And I make absolutely no apology for that at all.
What Rita is saying here, the human connection, is critical in business today. Going back to when I started Breakthrough, coming out of the corporate world, one of the things that I had experienced and was around a lot then was that business did not make much acknowledgement of the human being. It was about the business, it was about performance, it was about results. And when I set up the Breakthrough program, one of the things I wanted to do was to create a program which gave people tools that they could use in the rest of their life, not just in their business. And those tools work across the world. It's amazing, whoever we've worked with, and no matter what age. So from young children that we've worked with to people in their 80s and 90s, the tools work. And the reason for that is that they're based on what it is to be human. And so what Rita is reflecting there in helping people to bring out their own brilliance appeals a lot to me and is certainly aligned with what we're doing here with Breakthrough.
Absolutely. I mean, humanity's always been at the center of great leadership. She's completely right. And I think, her comments about the digital age, it is more important than ever when visibility and transparency are so high. So being truly purpose-driven is critical, I think, to your authenticity. You just can't get away with a mismatch anymore. Because it's so obvious, isn't it, Bart, when an organization pays lip service to purpose. We've had that when we've gone into organizations many times in the past, and you might have the poster on the wall, but nobody's living it for real.
Yes, and what that creates, from our point of view, is what we call in Breakthrough the cynicism gap, where you have this gap between what you're saying and what you're actually doing.
Now, onto our hot seat. This is the part of the show at the end of each episode where we ask our guests quick-fire questions to learn more about their views on life, what's important to them, and to learn about their habits for high performance. Are you ready?
I'm going to take a deep breath.
Yeah, we're taking the plunge. All right, let's go. So what's the most exciting thing you've ever done?
Well, of course, having the children. I do need to say that. I love them unconditionally and dearly. They are, without doubt, the most exciting things in my life. And my husband's not too bad either, I should say. But the most exciting thing I've ever done is meeting Sir David Attenborough. I've told him in front of 300 people I've had a crush on him since the age of 7. He's the reason why I'm inspired about green and sustainability in the environment and things like that, and have been involved in the environmental movement my whole life. And so that was the most exciting thing, meeting him and managing to speak to him for, several hours. It was amazing.
I'm incredibly jealous. He's an absolute national treasure. Finish this sentence. Success is...
Oh, it sounds so corny, but true. Making a real difference to people and the planet. That's what success is.
What inspires you in life?
It's quite simple. Human decency is what inspires me. I don't mind saying, I'm not ashamed to say, I cry easily, but the things I tend to cry at is by seeing people helping other people in a way that is truly decent, and I think that is always the thing, watching other people help others and watching people be brilliant. That is, and I mentioned earlier, I think if you don't want to see other people be brilliant, you haven't got the right to call yourself a leader. And that, in my view, is what a leader is there to be, to help people become the most brilliant version of themselves. That's what really inspires me in life.
All right, Rita, thank you so much for being our guest today. It's been an absolutely inspirational hour. One final question, Rita. If our listeners want to get in touch with you or find out more, what's the best way for them to do that? Is that through social media, maybe Instagram or LinkedIn or something like that? Or should they contact us to pass on a question?
Yes, LinkedIn or my website, www.ritaclifton.com. You can send me a note through that. So do get in contact, and I hope people have enjoyed listening.
Rita, and thanks from me. You've been a great mentor for me over the years. You've been a client, a colleague, and now a friend. And I was so pleased that you agreed to be on this podcast. And it's been wonderful, it really has. Thank you.
We've been honoured to have you, Rita.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for everything that you do, actually, for organisations and also for people. And again, I've been thrilled to be part of this. So thank you, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you for joining us for today's 3 lessons. Do make sure you hit the subscribe button and join us each month for another 3 lessons from Breakthrough Leaders. And you can reach out to us at Breakthrough Global on LinkedIn or Facebook, or via Twitter at Radiant Clarity, or on Instagram at Global Breakthrough.
And we'd love to hear from you, your feedback and your own leadership stories. We'd also love for you to share this episode on your own social media and review and rate this podcast on your player of choice, as we want to spread these transformative lessons as widely as possible.
And finally, a huge thanks to our production team, Yulia Sheltisova at Breakthrough Global and Robin Leeburn at Fairley Media. And of course, thank you for listening. See you next time.